Hey everybody, so I know I claimed a couple of days ago that I was not going to be making a habit of recording these types of videos where I just stare at the camera and talk, but sure enough there was a major event shortly thereafter, and I decided to make an exception, although on Thursday, the day that Julian Assange was arrested, planned to make a video, and I had a sudden and horrific bout of what I assume had to be food poisoning. Whatever it was one of the worst physical sensations I've ever experienced in my life. I do not recommend it. So make sure to refrigerate your food properly, although I thought I had been taking all the necessary precautions. In fact, on Thursday I had ordered in food that afternoon, so I don't know. There's something going on with that restaurant, apparently. Um, if I was of a more conspiratorial mindset, I could concoct some kind of theory where uh, a cabal of rustigators poisoned me, and maybe with the assistance of Adam Schiff, or at the direction of Adam Schiff. I don't know, that could be amusing. But no, I'm not going to go there. I think it was just a standard uh, improper food preservation technique or something. I don't know. But anyway, it was horrible. But I couldn't record a video, so I waited a bit, and I'm mostly recovered now. So just wanted to share a couple of thoughts on the Assange arrest. Obviously, a very disturbing sequence of events. So I am somebody who has been stalwart in defending Assange and WikiLeaks more broadly for now almost 9 years. So I started in journalism slash commentary in 2009, 2010, mostly 2010. And it was that very year that Assange posted the several troves of massively revelatory documents that were derived from Chelsea Manning, then Bradley. So the Afghanistan war logs, the Iraq war logs, the Guantanamo Bay records, and the State Department cables. And if you weren't, old enough at the time, or you just don't remember, please go back and review all the massive, newsworthy um, scoops, if you want to use that word, or blockbusters, or all the huge stories that came out of that series of leaks. I mean, there's probably been no more consequential series of journalistic leaks in all of history than that series. And I have no ability to list them all here. I mean, there's a reason why that they were covered all around the world for years, so it's not as if making this up. But what's sort of interesting to reflect back on is that the partisan dynamics then were much different. So to defend Assange or WikiLeaks in 2010-11 was almost to be characterized as some kind of left-wing anarchist nut. And, it's true that there were a lot of left-wing anarchists who were in favor of WikiLeaks, but not exclusively. I mean, they actually got support from across the board from transparency advocates, even people who are of a more right-wing bent who were in favor of the state being subjected to, again, more transparency and being imposed with these kind of restrictions on its ability to just get away with stuff in secret. So that was always kind of a misnomer in terms of that caricature. But nonetheless, that kind of was the general perception back then for a while, until 2016. So I should say, actually, that between 2010 and 2016, WikiLeaks did publish a ton of stuff. But it didn't get as much of attention because, in part, it dealt with non-U.S. countries. So it's not as if WikiLeaks just went totally dormant in that period. Although the attention paid to WikiLeaks did most certainly pick up in 2016, having to do with these emails related to the DNC and Hillary Clinton. And we all know the story. We should. So I don't have to rehearse all of it right now. But needless to say, the partisan dynamics very much shifted in 2016, where it somehow became assume that you were a Trump supporter or you were a conservative or you were a right-winger or alt-right or whatever if you supported the transparency efforts of WikiLeaks. And my thing was, no, I'm going to be consistent about this no matter who it affects, and no matter what the partisan incentives are. And so just think about what WikiLeaks did in 2016. They revealed emails that shone a light on the nefarious conduct and corrupt activity and wrongdoing that otherwise would have been concealed, that was carried out by what was then the ruling party in the United States, the Democrats. In 2016, the Democrats were effectively the ruling party, meaning they controlled the presidency and were, by the lights of most people, going to maintain control of the presidency in that election. Now, if you're the ruling party in the most powerful country in the world, militarily and economically, then, of course, it's 100% journalistically justified to take all kinds of measures to impose transparency and oversight on the secret dealings of members of that party, especially the most powerful actors in that party, like those whose emails were leaked in 2016, meaning John Podesta and all the donors who got their correspondences revealed, people like Neera Tandon, whose emails got revealed as well. Neera Tandon now is on a tear celebrating the Trump administration's prosecution of Assange. So Neera Tandon is always in this constant pose of resist, right? She's going to be the one who resists the Trump administration, takes them down. Yet, when the Trump administration, or the Trump DOJ, to be more specific, embarks on this massively harmful endeavor to essentially criminalize journalism, who's there cheerleading from the sidelines? Well, Neera Tandon, of course. Why not? Good for you, Neera. You want to know why Neera is now cheerleading for this? Because she had her correspondences leaked in 2016, and they made her look really bad, and rightly so. I went back and looked at one particular email that came out in the fall of 2016. It was an email from March of 2015, so before Hillary Clinton even launched her primary campaign. This was shortly after the New York Times first reported on the existence of Hillary's infamous private email server. Neera said something to the effect of, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe they thought they were going to get away with it." So basically, Neera was expressing her indignation to John Podesta that the Clintons were so arrogant that they thought they were going to get away with this private email server gambit. Because remember what the whole point of the private email server was. It was to circumvent, on the part of Hillary, State Department protocols, so she wouldn't have to accord with the standard regulations governing preservation and retention of public records. Because, in part, she was doing all kinds. We still don't know technically what the reason was that Hillary was so intent on concealing these private records and not having them be subject to public examination. But we also know that the State Department and the Clinton Foundation ended up kind of fusing together in numerous respects, so that Clinton Foundation donors could gain access to State Department, the corridors of power, in a way that raised all kinds of serious ethical concerns. And the Clintons had always misled the public as to what the relationship between the Clinton Foundation and the State Department would be. So it made sense, in a way, for them to want to set up this private email server so their dealings would not be revealed. But even Neera Tandon, who again was just a chief propagandist for the Clintons, who was one of their biggest advocates, and constantly lied on their behalf. If even she was indignant about their corrupt activity in this instance, in relation to the email server, well, gee, that looks really bad, doesn't it? So yeah, it makes sense for Neera to have a personal grudge And let's just say who Neera is. Let's underscore who she is. She's the head of the Center for American Progress, which is the most influential liberal, quote-unquote, think tank in the United States. And she very well could have been Hillary's chief of staff had she won the presidency. So she has every reason in the world to be personally vengeful about Assange, notwithstanding any of the First Amendment implications. That's why she's locking arms with the most authoritarian elements of the Trump administration, meaning people like Mike Pompeo and John Bolton, and celebrating this incredibly incendiary arrest, which has untold implications for American journalistic practice. And she's not alone in terms of Democrats supporting this. I mean, these Democrats claim that they're these vehement resistors of Trump. And yet, every now and then, they'll get on board with the Trump administration policy initiative, or Trump, in this case, DOJ initiative, and they'll not perceive any contradiction there, even though the stuff that Trump does that they support is generally his most harmful stuff. So, for example, the Syria strikes. Trump bombed Syria twice in terms of Assad government targets in 2017 and 2018. All the top Democrats who are these big Trump resistors clapped and applauded and, celebrated. Venezuela. Trump's trying to overthrow the government of Venezuela. For the most part, all his Democratic antagonists are for this. And it's a similar situation now with the Assange arrest. So Trump, occasionally, he gets into that bipartisan sweet spot, and he gets all the Democrats who claim to hate him on his team. So that's always interesting. So there's a huge amount of liberal and Democratic and even some leftist inconsistency and hypocrisy and self-contradiction in relation to Assange, but there's a lot of the Trump himself and Trump supporters don't look particularly good either. I mean, it takes you about 2 seconds to Google all the instances in which Trump in 2016 not just cited WikiLeaks, but glowingly touted WikiLeaks. I mean, he said, "I love WikiLeaks." You can't get much more explicit than that. Now, I know Trump says a million different things about any given subject, and a lot of times, they conflict with one another. So you can only take it at face value, but nonetheless, could get much more straightforward than Trump's vociferous, effusive praise for WikiLeaks. So for him now to say, as he did this past week, that he doesn't know anything about WikiLeaks. It could be I don't know anything about what's going on. I just read about it. Yeah, sure. I mean, nobody believes that, even his most ardent supporters, that Trump doesn't know about WikiLeaks. I mean, Trump would explicitly state that he had read the WikiLeaks emails. So he would go on the WikiLeaks website and read the emails. That's what he said. So this idea that Trump is now powerless in the face of the deep state that is persecuting Assange is just silly. I mean, Trump, whatever you think about this Mueller investigation, and I've been one of the most vocal critics of it in terms of its fundamental logic, its factual predicates, its tactics, etc. But that all aside, Trump has had no compunction about denouncing the Mueller investigation. So he's been denouncing the Department of Justice's activity when it impinges on himself or his family or his associates, right? So he would constantly be going on Twitter and on TV and saying, "Oh, this is so unfair. People are being victimized. This is a witch hunt. Blah 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 blah." Which, fine. He has a right to do that, I guess. But it just goes to show that he has the ability, and at times he's had the willingness and eagerness to go around publicly and denounce what he views as unfair Department of Justice behavior. So if he felt that this prosecution of Assange was unjust, then he could most certainly say something similarly in this instance, but he's not. And that kind of tells you all you need to know about Trump. I did I wrote an article for this yesterday for The Spectator, which kind of goes into all this stuff, which you can read. I'll link to it in the description box. So yeah, that's basically it. I don't want to do a long-winded, ranty type video very often, and part of the reason why these videos can be a little annoying is because people will just incessantly comment on your physical appearance and like where you're at and stuff. So yeah, I'm sitting outside, it's a nice day, I did get a haircut, blah blah blah. Just like commenting on all that stuff. Although I guess since I'm in the public eye to some extent, it's kind of inevitable, but whatever. So many people do. You people do claim that you enjoy these types of videos, so I'll oblige. Oh, and one more thing. I know I am now totally contradicting myself in terms of not wanting to make a long video, but I just want to make one other point. Something else that's also interesting that I haven't seen remarked upon that much is, if you look at the indictment that was unsealed on Thursday, it shows that the indictment was actually filed over a year ago. So it was filed on March 6, 2018. So they waited over a year to unseal this, and the timing, I think, is curious. So I'm not positing affirmatively any explanation for this, but this is an avenue of inquiry that I would want to pursue. So why did they choose to issue this indictment now, when forefront in the public mind is all this stuff around Mueller and collusion in the 2016 election, the culmination of that investigation, in which Julian Assange supposedly is a central player. But Mueller didn't even bother questioning Julian Assange, much less charge him, despite Julian Assange supposedly having been a central player in this massive global espionage conspiracy. So why didn't Mueller perceive it as within his investigative purview to at least question Assange? And again, as far as we know, he didn't even seek him out for questioning. So how could that be? I don't know. It's a good question. Because in the indictment, all the facts stem from what had been known in 2010 or 2011. There's nothing new in the indictment factually. It all stems from the journalistic activity that Assange undertook to facilitate the disclosure by Chelsea Manning of the files related to the Iraq war logs, the Afghanistan war logs, the Guantanamo records, and the State Department cables. So, there's nothing new in this indictment that the Obama Department of Justice hadn't already been aware of. Remember, the Obama Department of Justice vigorously pursued potential prosecution of Assange, in part at Hillary Clinton's behest. If not at her behest, Hillary Clinton was calling for it adamantly. And they decided that any such prosecution was untenable. And there's nothing in the Trump DOJ's indictment that suggests that any new fact pattern was uncovered. So why do they do it now? Well, again, good question. I think a lot of these things are now conflated in the public mind, right? So people hear collusion, Russia, 2016, WikiLeaks, blah blah blah, and they have a hard time distinguishing everything. It's not their fault. I mean, it's a complicated series of subjects. A lot of journalists fail to properly differentiate between these things. So I don't blame the average Joe. But I think to suspect some kind of political motivation here would not be unwarranted, at least in terms of the timing. So I'm curious to hear more about that. All right, so I'll leave it there for good for now. Enjoy your sunny Saturday afternoon. And please, if you enjoy this quote content, and I hate that word, but so be it, please give on Patreon or PayPal. I prefer Patreon just because it gives you some predictability in terms of the amount of money you're taking in on a given month, so you can plan ahead. I will be having more reporting on Trump-Russia because the story is not going away. Some of it will be exclusive. So keep your eyes open for that. And yes, that's it for now.